Hello, my Facebook family. Thank you for joining me here again today. It's Crystal, and as you can see, I have a little bit of different branding today. My podcast is no longer from the schoolhouse to the state house. It is now Crystal Loves Texas because if there's anything you know about me, it's that I do love Texas. I'm a native Texan. I've been here all my life, and there is nothing I would not do for my state or the people that live in my state. And guys, today it's going to be a little bit of an interesting episode because I have got some guests here today that are really going to be speaking to issues that are affecting thousands of people here in Texas. And I'm not over exaggerating. When I say thousands, I mean thousands. And sometimes the population that I'm talking about is actually a little bit of a hidden population. We'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. But the first thing I'd like to do, well, I know I'm going to do a teaser, not that you need a teaser, but most of you have seen my promo for today. But I do want to introduce my guests that are here today. And I've got some that are stuck in rodeo traffic. We might as well say it. We're all from Houston. We know how the rodeo traffic can be, but they're stuck in rodeo traffic and they're going to be coming in as they get here. But I do want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is something that was one of the platforms that I actually ran my campaign on, and not because I thought it was popular, because to some people it may be a little bit unpopular, but it was heartfelt to me because it's something that is near and dear to the heart of, I'm going to say, every Texan. And if not in an immediate way, certainly in a way that is a little less uh, nuclear. Okay. And that is voting rights, not just plain voting rights, not just voting rights for everyone out there. You turn 18, you go down to the post office, you fill out a registration card and you learn to vote. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about voting rights and the restoration of voting rights for those who have been incarcerated at some point in their lives. This is something that I didn't even realize was an issue, and I think that a lot of people don't realize that it's an issue. But my guests today are going to speak to that, and there is a reason that I have these particular guests here, because they are going to be able to speak with authority and good sound authority and answer some questions about what that process is like, if it can actually be done. We've heard people say that no, once you lose your voting rights, that's it. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people think. But without any further ado, and again, remember, I'm going to have some guests kind of slipping in here, so don't mind them as they slip in. I'm going to introduce them as they come in. But the first person that I'd like to introduce is Dr. Brandon Warren. And he is, I'm going to let him introduce himself because he is definitely an authority on reentry, and especially as it relates to people here in Texas. Dr. Brandon, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. First of all, thank you for, I'm delighted to be here, excited to talk about this topic. So I am formerly incarcerated. I have been out about 16 years. I served a total of about 6.5 years. While I was there, I had the opportunity to enroll in a college program. Since I've been out, I worked my way through academia and recently finished a doctorate of education at the University of St. Thomas right here in Houston. So I have been working inside TDCJ as an administrator and adjunct professor for two different college and prison programs since 2011. And I'm currently the director of reentry services for Lee College Huntsville Center, which has been offering college and prison since at least 1965. So glad to be here and excited to discuss this topic.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you this, by the time we're done today, you may be tired. You may have to take a little bit of a break because I know we're going to have a whole lot of questions. And that's okay, because I want this information to be out there. My next guest that I'd like for you to meet is a gentleman. And this is always strange for me because when I say he's to my left, it looks like he's to my right, but he looks like he's to my right to me, but he's actually to my left. But go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Von Taylor. I'm Crystal's cousin actually, and we participated fully in her campaign to get her voted in as state representative for District 131. Um, it was a very
Yeah.
great learning experience, and I'm very proud of it. Let me say
Thank
that.
you.
Yes, I'm formerly incarcerated. I did 13 and a half years in Texas prison system. Um, it's not too many things that I don't understand or don't know about their prison system and the resources that are available for those that's outside once they finally get released and do actually they're part to contribute back to society. Um, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm from Sunnyside, Texas. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I have several businesses that's in Sunnyside in the Third Ward area. My business partner, Quincy Moore, he's on the way as well. We have several things going on. I'm a co-founder of Effective Revisions, which is a nonprofit organization. And what we do is we deal with preventative measures in reference to the youth and also reentry for those that's returning citizens that's coming back to society.
Thank you so much, Vaughn. I was not gonna say that you were my cousin. I didn't know if you wanted people to know that you were my
I'm
cousin or
proud
not, but
of you.
that's okay. Well, thank you. But let me tell you, I'm going to be just very honest with you and Professor Brandon here today, and let me tell you why. Because I think I speak for a lot of people out there who who are just kind of clueless when it comes to people who are reentering. Basically, if it doesn't affect us, we don't pay attention to it. That's how the status quo is. If it doesn't affect us, if we don't know someone personally, we just kind of we don't pay attention to it.
Mhm.
And that's a shame because this is something that's very real, and we are talking about something that affects thousands and thousands of people a year. Now, let me just ask you this, and I know that you and Professor Brandon have have done a lot of homework on this, and you can probably answer this question down to the exact numbers. But just in Harris County, how many people from TDC are released back into Harris County a year annually?
Actually, to be honest with you, Crystal, when you first got in contact with me about doing the show, I actually had to start doing my research, and there's so much information that needs to be compiled,
Right.
and this is actually a new subject to me
Okay.
because I've been on the ground since I've been home.
Right.
Um, uh, I've had great jobs and build career for myself,
Right.
but then I went into my entrepreneur spirit. I tapped into that and went on my own.
Right.
And so I've been so focused on that I haven't
Yeah.
been able to keep up with the numbers. And so I'm actually here to give my input on what I know,
Okay.
but at the same
Great.
time learn from others who are here that have the actual data.
That's perfect. So we're going to throw that to you, Professor Brandon. Can you kind of touch on that a little bit? And even if it's not exact figures, because I know sometimes it may be difficult, especially in mid-year like this, to to be able to put a finger on that. But can you kind of give us a ballpark as to how many people, men and women, are released from the Department of Corrections yearly here in Texas?
Yes, if I understood the 2019 fiscal year statistical report, there were just over 9,000 people released to Harris County. At any given time, the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition, well, actually, they're now I can't remember, they have a new name on Justice and Equity, but they in 2016 noted we had almost 14,000 people on parole in Harris County. And in 2018, KHOU did a piece on parolees, and they quoted it at 18,000. So at any given time, we have over 10,000. How many are being released each year is going to fluctuate with just the landscape, and I'm sure that COVID interrupted the
Right.
sort of average flow but probably more than 10,000.
That's a that's a lot of people, Professor Brandon. Now I'm just going to extrapolate from that. If there are that many people who are released, let's go with a low number. Let's go with the 9,000. If there are that many people released on a yearly basis, and for the most part, we have people serving on an average, upon release, an average of a 5-year parole, or are there longer parole provisions? How does that work? What's the average?
I couldn't tell you what the average number of people who are completing their sentences is, but yeah, so people can come out with a year or two of parole, or 25 years, or life.
Wow.
Talked to someone the other day who's on parole until 2073. I mean, he's out. He's been out for 6 years, but he's on parole till 2073,
Wow. Okay.
assuming he makes it that long. So
Yeah.
it's going to vary quite a bit. But as far as like completing or discharging, because once they're discharged of their sentence in Texas, they're eligible to vote. I don't know what the rate of completion is so
Right.
that they would be eligible to vote.
Okay. And guys, I want to make sure that everyone heard that very well, because the vast majority of people are not going to be those on a 73-year parole. That's not going to be the vast amount of people. Probably
Right.
on the average, would you say between 5 and 10 years on the average, Professor?
For parole, length of parole,
Yes, sir.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, with that being the case, let me tell you um, an occurrence that happened to my sister just last week. This was just last week, ladies and gentlemen. And I think this probably speaks for many, many people who are in a similar situation. They were actually, my campaign manager and my sister were out at a polling place. Well, they stopped for lunch. They said, well, we're going to get lunch. So they ran across the street to a deli, and they were in a deli, and there was a young man who was sitting there, and he was obviously someone who was doing business. He was completing a business transaction there, and what he was doing is they looked over his shoulder, and he was writing out an invoice to the particular deli owner that was which was the deli that they were in. Come on in, Quincy. And they said, young man, let me ask you something. They didn't say young man. They said, hey, let me ask you something. Have you voted yet? And he said, no, I don't vote. And they said, well, wait a minute. Why do you not vote? Because I don't really think that it matters at all. It doesn't matter. Whatever, people are going to do what they want to do anyway. It doesn't matter. And then, of course, when he said that, they had to stop and say, wait a second. Then you have a whole lot more faith in human spirit than I do. He said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, if you don't vote, that means you're going to trust everyone else who does vote to make the right decision for you if you don't vote. So you've got a lot more faith in the human spirit than I do. And he said, well, you know what? I never thought about it like that. And he said, well, real talk. I'm just going to tell you the real reason. He said, well, I was in prison, and I can't vote because I was in prison. And they said, well, how long ago were you in prison? He said, well, I was in prison 15 years ago. And they said, well, wait a second. Have you finished all the terms of your parole, and you've had your parole discharged? He said, yeah, that was over 10 years ago. And they said, well, you're eligible to vote. He said, I am. And I'm telling that story because a lot of people sit in exactly that position. They don't know. They feel that since they have had a conviction, they can now no longer vote. And can you please shed some light on that for us, Professor Brandon? Because that's not generally the case. Can you please shed some light on that? And how often do you see that being something that people honestly believe?
Well, there's a lot to say there, and I'm only going to give my experience in that regard, which Quincy and Vaughn can probably speak to as well, based on their experience. I didn't realize that was an issue until just a few months ago on my YouTube channel. I interviewed a friend of mine who spent something like 9 years in prison. He's been out just as long as I have, over 15 years. And in the course of the interview, he said, I don't care about politics. I can't vote anyway. And I didn't realize, I just assumed he knew that he was eligible to vote, and he did not realize that. And he's very successful in the community, entrepreneur, whatnot, but did not know. I can tell you that the programs inside of TDCJ are geared towards making sure people are literate and get a GED, and usually some kind of vocational training. There's
Right.
also sort of therapeutic classes like AA, cognitive intervention,
Yes.
but there's nothing obvious for civic participation, anything resembling a civics class. Now, there is a new program that's being piloted on the WIN unit that does incorporate some aspect of understanding the Constitution and civic participation. But in general, and I'm pretty sure Quincy and Vaughn can say the same thing, having a course in civic participation is just not a part of the regular programming that's involved in TDCJ. So people just don't know.
Thank you. I'm gonna come back to that. But since Quincy came in, I want everyone to meet our next guest who's here. His name is Quincy Moore. Quincy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your business?
Okay. As Krista said, my name is Quincy Moore, better known to the streets and to other activists as Hamza. I am a business owner of Moore's Lawn Care and Outside Services, and I am a co-founder of Effective Revisions, as my partner Vaughn Taylor has explained to you all. And I strive to help rebuild the communities that I was once a part of destroying.
Okay. And you said something that really struck a chord with me, Quincy, and I'll tell you why. And Professor Brandon, you can speak to this too, if you will. It's been my experience in meeting a lot of the men and women that I've had an opportunity to meet, who are re-entering or who have re-entered, that they are very, very much in tune with wanting to be a part of decisions that are being made. Now, once you can get past that, I'm not going to call it a facade, but that lack of information that a lot of people display, because just like you said in your experience, people just don't know. Would you say that many of the people that you encounter and many of the people that you have in your classes at the prison and at the university, at the college, seem to really want to take part in the political process? Do you think that they take it more seriously once those rights have been taken away? If those rights are restored, do people who are wanting those rights restored take their responsibility more seriously?
Yeah, education certainly has a positive impact on their likelihood of being involved in the community. Once they understand the process through things like history and government classes, then they're much more likely to be involved. Education generally has that effect on people. But in a lot of this conversation, there was an important study or survey done by the Marshall Project back in 2020. They did I believe they are correct, that it's the first of their kind, where they sent out surveys all over the country, and they got 8,200 responses from people who are currently incarcerated in 2020. And one of the things they found there was that there was a positive correlation between length of sentence and willingness to be involved in politics. In other words, someone who just goes in and out a short timer for a year, 2 or 3 is not as likely to be involved, but somebody who spent 10 or 15 years is much more likely to be involved in the process upon release.
And that's interesting. Speak to that.
Yeah, I want to speak to that. First of all, I think this is a very good topic, and it's very informative. I think we should, or you should, have different segments dealing with this particular topic, because the information that's out there, a lot of us don't understand it, because a lot of us kind of fear, or basically fear politics,
Yes.
because we feel like it's something that we would never have a hand in. But politics is very important in reference to our communities at the ground level.
Right.
Politics deal with us receiving certain type of funding for our immediate communities, for our schools, for even the irrigation systems that's around in those areas. And with that being said, I know for myself, I can speak for myself. I didn't go in depth with gaining my voting rights back once I came home. I was so focused on trying to get myself established,
Yes.
of using the resources that was at hand to me, um, trying to establish myself with my own place to stay, with my
Right.
own vehicle, with work, this and that, yada yada yada, everything
Right.
that most guys are focused on once they come home.
Right.
And so it takes a little time for them to get down the line and become involved in things that's happening in their communities, for them to understand the importance of politics and the importance of voting and casting your voice.
Yes. And I know that, you know, my sister and I have been on you. We have been on you about this, and we and he knows this. And I'm going to turn to Quincy in a minute because I'm going to speak to Quincy on this too. But one of the first things we started asking you is, Vaughn, have you know, when are you going to be eligible to register to vote?
Right.
When are you going to
Right.
be? And it was like sometimes you were like, oh, just give me a minute, just give me a minute. But you know, we realize how important this is. And you know, Professor Brandon and Vaughn and Quincy, do you know what strength there could be in the voices that are unheard because of a lack of knowledge there? And just, you know, just mull on that for a minute.
Well,
Quincy,
teaching is very important.
Yes.
People have to understand the importance of voting, first of all.
Yes.
Casting their ballot, casting their vote.
Right.
It has to be taught in our communities where, you know, we fending for ourselves in the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we're not worried about other things that's not immediate and important to us in that moment.
Right.
But when we go out into those, Quincy is an outreach specialist.
Yes.
When he goes out into the community, you know, he's getting the interaction from the people that really telling you, man, look, this is my issue right here. This is my
Right.
problem. I'm not thinking about that right now.
Exactly.
But engaging with those people at the time, you can begin to give them a platform of information and understanding,
Right.
to where they eventually understand. They get to a point and they say, okay, well, vote may be important to me.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
Exactly. Quincy, what I want you to do, if you can, is go ahead and speak to, if you would not mind sharing a little bit about what you told us when we sat down and we had a very long meeting with our team that morning over at the offices. Mm-hmm. And you know, you were so raw in explaining your thoughts on being able to come out and reestablish yourself. And there was one thing that really struck me that you said, and tell us a little bit about how long you were incarcerated.
Okay, I was sentenced to 35 years and done 18 calendar years on at 35. And you know, when you come, all right, speaking about voting, this is a very pertinent subject right here. And like Bun said, and Brandon, he also echoed education, because we come from an environment that told, you know, that basically promoted that, hey man, our voice don't count, our votes are nothing,
right.
It's all rigged, it means nothing. So now we have to get back out there in the streets and speak to the people and speak to them in a language that they understand, that, hey man, your vote does count. You got a problem with your streets having a bunch of holes up in it. It's because you have a representative in there that you didn't vote for. You were not tomorrow. You upset because, you know, JoJo got since the 25 years, it's because you didn't vote, and that's a judge that's sitting in there. There's a DA sitting up in there. So all these people that we don't want to vote for, or we say we don't, our voices don't count.
Yeah.
All these things right here, they really affect us. So I believe that when you speak to that demographic, which is ex-offenders or returning citizens, and you explain to them in the language that they understand that voting does affect you, then they'd be like, well, okay then, man. And then we have to go through the process of showing them step by step. Because the only people that I actually had a political conversation with when I was in prison about politics, and we was just trying to tell the president down on the cool, but just understanding the politics, was those that I went to Lee College with, those that I was in college with. So these were the people that I actually sat there and spoke to concerning politics. So those that were outside of the college arena, that wasn't really interesting to them. And it was individuals who had long-term sentences.
Okay. Now, and one thing you said to me is this. You said, I knew a few years after I got there that I had to train my mind to just put myself in a mindset that, okay, you're going through the motions. You're going to come out of this. And you said, you told us this, and I'll never forget this. You said, I knew just a couple of years after I got there, I'm not coming back to this. I already know I would never come back to this situation. And I think that you probably echo what a whole lot of people are saying and feel. And you are, only you are sitting in the seat, and you have walked in the shoes of people who are currently going through the process. I mean, people who will be released this year, even people who were released 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. Let's say hypothetically, right now, we have got 5,000 to 7,000 people sitting in Harris County on the cusp of being able to have their sentences fully discharged, completion of parole. What do we need to do? What can we do, Professor Brandon, to begin being able to reach out to those people and getting the word out there and taking them through the steps that they need to go through so that they can have their voting rights restored? What steps do we need to take just as community, people within the community?
Well, so TDCJ's, of their several divisions, they have a reentry division now. That would be, if TDCJ were to make an effort to doing this, that would be the area that's most suited to helping people understand this, would be their reentry and integration division. For us, I would talk to Quincy about this because I've had the privilege of knowing Quincy for a couple of years now. There are a bunch of organizations here in the Houston area that want to do or streamline reentry, but they're all working more or less independently of each other. But none of them, to my knowledge, are incorporating anything like the need for voting rights or civic participation. Statewide Leadership Council is one that is doing that. They're based out of Austin, and probably the Texas Appleseed, but Statewide Leadership Council is an important one, I think, that people should be aware of. So it's just a matter of marketing. And here in Houston and DFW are the two centers in Texas with the most people coming out of prison. So a real effort should be placed there. Okay.
Well, and I think that's optimal. That is optimal. But let's say that the collaboration does not come together like it needs to, or there is a bureaucracy that somehow rears its ugly head. As individuals, what can we do with our own family members, with our own friends, with our own loved ones who may be coming to a place where they can have those rights restored? What do we need to do as individuals to help walk them through that process?
Well, my response is just basic education in the sense that, well, first of all, Texas is one of 16 states that requires completion of the sentence in order to vote. There are still some states that it doesn't matter whether you're off paper or not, you can't vote ever, like Florida. Right. There's only 3 states that put no restrictions whatsoever. So, we're privileged in one sense that we're one of a group of states that allows some sort of, or encourages us to become voters. But the other thing is just that we do also live in a country wherein citizens have a role to play in the governing, of our state. And that is not something that I don't think people think about that when they're coming out. They're thinking about a job, they're thinking about housing, thinking about food.
Survival. Yes.
That's a farther out, secondary, tertiary sort of goal.
Right.
But I think it still should be incorporated into some sort of reentry courses. It's what I do in all of my classes. I spend a day talking about education and its role with a healthy democracy and informed voters. So that's my response, is just basic education.
I think that's a great answer. That's the direction I would have went into as well. We have to inform the people first. They have to understand the importance before you can just come out and just say, "Hey, you need to vote. Are you registered? You need to get registered," because it's a lot of different variables involved too, that down the line that we need to understand in reference to those, not just the people that's coming home from incarceration and finally, discharge their probation or parole,
Right.
but it's other things, other factors that's
For example.
Okay, now this is I'm glad you said that, because I highlighted this from legalvote.com, restore your vote, and the topic is restore your vote. I have a felony conviction. Can I vote? Now I give you a basic rundown of who can and who can't vote, but it say in fact up to 18 million Americans with past convictions can now vote.
Can vote right now. Yeah.
And so it says they just don't know because of felony disenfranchisement laws in every state can be confusing.
Yes, and see that's that's what I really want to tackle, and it cannot be the kind of thing that is addressed on such a large and confusing scale. I think it's going to be important for us as individuals. Let's, do we need to do it as within communities? Do we need to do outreach in churches? What can we do as a grassroots effort? Because that's where we're going to see the greatest impact with people that we have direct contact with.
But Crystal, if we're trying to appeal to individuals that are coming home, right, like Brandon said, that right there, voting, that right there is going to be like, over here to the far left, getting a job, getting a home, food. That's going to be my basic necessities. So for the politicians out there that want to tap into that particular demographic, if you really want to get those guys votes, you know what I mean? You talk to a guy that done 18 years, you really want to get our vote? Tend to our needs.
Help me with some resources.
Help me get a job.
Right.
And then I pay attention to what you're talking about.
That's right.
If you're trying to get me to register to vote, I don't care about voting. I care about this job application. I care about a place to live where I can have a peace of mind.
Right.
Now you have my attention. So now while you're giving me these resources, then you can slide in and educate me on how to vote and why voting is important. But as long as my stomach hurting and I don't have a place to live, I'm not worried about a vote.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that once we are able to enfranchise a large amount of people who who have been formerly incarcerated and get them voting, do you think that they are going to have the greatest impact on their fellow brothers and sisters who are coming out of that position? Good questions. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Each one teach one.
Absolutely, because they'll be able to speak the language that they will understand their needs and be able to speak to that, and then what's going to happen is these formerly incarcerated, it's going to become the norm. I've been to prison, I'm out, I can vote. That becomes the norm. Right now, it's not the norm.
Right.
And I think it give them power. Once you give a certain amount of power to a person, they're like, oh, I can do this.
Right.
And it start awakening them.
Yes.
Mentally.
Yes.
And they want to dig in and do more research and find out. And that's when they start to tell, hey, Tony, look, this is what we can do. Did you know that? Quincy, hey, we can go do this and we can go do that. But if the information is there.
Right.
The information is there, but you have to search for that information.
And see, that is, and that's the crux of why we're here today. And Professor Brandon, can you possibly speak to this? Because you talk to people who are currently incarcerated. And why do you think that there is certain information. Well, you touched on it a little bit at the very beginning before Quincy got here. But my question that I was posing is that why do you think there's certain information that just is, I'm not going to say it's not disseminated to people, but it's not right there in the front. It's not right there in the front. It's not
Yeah.
surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, there could be a number of reasons for that, but I know that when it comes to educational programs, for example, the state wants to show taxpayers some sort of a return on investment, and so they're choosing programs to implement in the prison that can show an easy sort of return on investment, and
Right.
so that's one reason. So, for example, vocational classes,
Yeah.
that's a real easy. Give a guy a welding trade, he gets a job as a welder, that's success. It's
Right.
not the case if you do something like a liberal arts degree.
Right.
But when it comes to civic participation, it's just farther down on the list, if not even thought about. Then there's not an easy correlation that can be pointed out. Although I did read one study that was done, and I want to say it was 2020, which showed that people who did participate in voting were half as likely to come back to prison. In other words, people
Yes.
who were not involved in voting and civic participation would come back at a twice as high as those who were informed. That's just something I read earlier this afternoon in 2020. So I need to look more at the methodology, how they did that study. That's the only thing I've ever seen. Most of what you see in statistics is jobs, employment recidivism. And so whatever is decreasing those or increasing those, that's where everybody's focus is at, not voting patterns.
So we're not going to look to get that. We shouldn't be looking to get that from within the justice system. That's probably going to be something that comes from without or from within the community. Yeah, grassroots organizations. Now, Quincy, you were a little bit of an anomaly because you have been out for how long? You said right now to date, how long have you been out?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. But when we sat down and we started to talk about what your plans were and where you wanted to see yourself, you seem to have a very, very keen idea of how important that political process was in getting you to that point. Are you the norm, or are people just not having that conversation inside of prisons today?
Well, I will have to attribute that to education, because the more we learn, the broader our perspective is, and we understand what things that we need to do in order to affect qualitative change. And so, preparing yourself to come home, you don't do that right there when you get parole. You start that year. I was ready to come. I mean, 10 years before I was up for parole, I was ready to come home.
That's what you were saying.
You know, so it was like
you were taking the steps.
The steps, yeah. Just act, as if. And so, looking at what is it that I need to do. But I would. There are a lot of individuals, and then also it's a support system.
Okay.
Because it was like when I came home, I had a lot of individuals who sat there and spoke to me and gave me different advice about this and that.
Right.
And it was cool. But when I had spoke to Vaughn,
yeah,
he spoke to me in a language that I understood. It wasn't so. What can I say? It was like, look, man, I understand you. I know you come from. We got similar backgrounds, XYZ, and he gave it to me, and I felt that it resonated. And so in return, we done that right there to other guys, and that right there what gave birth to effective revisions right there. So it's like voting. That's very important. Getting an education, job, etc. And these are the things that we are pushing to guys that are coming home. The necessities that they need, because you have programs out there, but they are not meeting the needs of the guys that are coming home. It's flowery, it's beautiful,
yeah,
but it's not meeting the needs.
Okay.
No immediate needs.
So we're looking at about 15 and a half minutes, okay, before we have to close out. And I know that I have my niece here who's going to tell us some of the comments that we've received over there. But Professor Brandon, I've just gotten out No, I'm sorry. My sentence has just been fully discharged. I am gainfully employed. What are the steps that I need to take right now? I don't know anything about. I know that I have gotten that I've been out of prison 10 years. So I would like to vote. What do I need to do right now? What are the steps that I would need to take right now so that I could vote in November?
Right. You would ask me, and specific websites, I can't remember. It was 2008 when I got off parole, and I was excited about the opportunity to vote. And I think I just went to a booth that was out here by the courthouse in the Bear Creek West Side area where they were talking about, voter registration. And I just went over there and did it. Since then, it's just been a matter of, refilling stuff out online. But that initial the initial way I did it was to go to one of these voter registration, turnouts at the courthouse. And, so the first time that I did vote, it got kicked back and said there was some problem, but it was just that first year. It may not have processed appropriately,
Right.
but after that, I've never had that sort of a response. So I've been able to actively participate.
But that's good he mentioned that, because
Yes.
down the line, it's some issues that occur from some of the articles that I have been reading, that's in law about certain things, like if you fully discharge your parole or your probation, but you may still owe a fee, like you ain't paid out your fees,
Yes.
they can
Yeah.
come back and kick your application out.
Okay. And
That shouldn't apply for Texas, but you are correct. There's still about 20 states that operate along those lines, and Florida is one of them. I kept hearing a bunch of bad stuff about Florida. I don't think Texas is one of them, but you could be right about that.
and as a matter of fact, and all of these resources that Vaughn has found, and Vaughn has found one with the Texas State Law Library, and those are going to be pretty accurate and pretty detailed. But there's another one that I've also found, and it is a nonprofit that operates here in Texas, and they have it where you can call a 1-800 number and put in whatever your identification number was that you used when you were on parole, and they will let you know if you are fully discharged or if you have anything that is outstanding. So the first step, Professor Brandon, is that a person would need to make sure that by doing their due diligence and checking to make sure that they are fully discharged and that they owe no fees or fines. That's going to be their first step.
Correct. If Vaughn's right about that, they need to do that. For me, I didn't have any sort of restitution. It was just a matter of completing my sentence. But that may be correct to make sure that they don't owe anything.
Okay. And then the second step is to find and many times there are huge voter registration drives that go on in communities, and that happens usually around the time of an election. But even if there's not an election going on, you can go to a site like harrisvotes.org, and I will make sure that I give that information too. And you can simply go down. You can still fill out a voter registration card at the post office. They still have them. And fill out your information. And if you are ineligible, like Professor Brandon said, it will get kicked back. So you'll know at that time that you have got some work to do. But the thing about it is, those are the steps that have got to be taken early.
I think it's so important because, like, just coming from like a younger point of view, I don't have friends who've like been incarcerated, but I think it's so important to, let's say, if I do have someone like that I know, like a friend who's been incarcerated, they need that information, because I think it's like one of those things, like, the information is out there. A lot of people just don't want you to know that. Like, a lot of people may not want like ex felons, or like back into society and voting and participating.
And I wanted to bring that out.
We know who those people
Introduce
are.
yourself.
Hi, well, I'm Tony. I'm Crystal's niece.
And my little cousin.
Oh yes, and Vaughn's little cousin. And I just feel like it's so
She's a
important.
student.
Yes, I'm a student at Wichita State. I'm a sophomore. Woo. But I think it's so important though to tell people that, because like if they get out and they're like, oh well, I can't really do anything at this point. No, you can. There are resources for you. but people literally just have to tell them. Like it's kind of like unfair if they don't.
Well,
they don't have
everyone will tell you that I'm a little bit unorthodox in the way that I would like to see our government look. I would like to see our government um, on the state, local, and national level have be in be and have people of different age ranges. I'd like to see more age of a diversity in age range with people who are making decisions. There are some offices that people can run for in our country where you only have to in our state where you only have to be 18 years of old. Some 18 years old. Some city councils. When you have that diversity, especially when it comes to the ages of people who are making decisions, I think people are a lot more inclined to be okay with decisions that are made because they'll say, well, someone who looks like me, who's my age, was part of that. We got to think about those kind of things. I tell my students that all the time. And just like I said last week, when I was running a few weeks ago, I was so excited to see one of my students that I taught who was also running for judge. And that made me feel good because I tell my students all the time, I want to see your names out here on signs around these polling places 10 years from now. I want to see that. And I never thought I'd live to see the day, but I lived to see the day, and that did happen.
I think it's more prevalent now because one thing about the millennials, they are actually not fearful.
Yeah,
They're not. Yeah,
They're not, and
and Generation Z.
I guess is that my
yeah, of course,
Yes.
of course,
Yes,
but they're not fearful. I mean, you can't tell them what they can't do.
that's true.
Right. Yeah.
And we have to bridge the gap between brothers like myself. I know me and Quincy old, and possibly Dr. Brown, but we don't look it.
No.
But we have an opportunity to possibly bridge that gap. But one brother that we went to the community meeting in Third Ward over at Spivey's. What was that, Quincy? That was Monday. Yeah, this past Monday. And the brother Lord Ford, he said something very powerful that we need to think about. And Quincy just mentioned it too. It's about the conversation and the language,
Right.
Yeah.
between the younger generation, the millennials, ourselves, and then the ones before us.
Us.
Right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, if we're not speaking that language,
Right.
I don't want to hear what you're talking about.
Yeah. So it's not going to take me. I may not get through to you.
Right.
But someone her age will get through to someone else her age.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes.
But it has to take that middle person too, because what you're speaking on in reference to getting the people that are not counted,
Right.
you have to have that go between.
Right.
Yeah.
Out there canvassing as long as well as the millennials as well.
Everyone has a place.
Everyone has a place. This is our community.
Yeah.
Right.
This is our community. But a lot of times we don't know. We don't know.
So I have the information.
And the information is right there, but it's one thing that I would like to read in reference to the guides, Texas.gov from the Texas State Law Library in reference to voting. And again, it mentioned about the disenfranchised and the language of what's being spoken from the law being confusing.
Yes.
But it say once someone has fully discharged their sentence or has been pardoned, their right to vote is automatically restored in Texas.
Right. Okay.
However, it is not always clear as to when the sentence has been fully completed. And it says, see the resources below for more information in voting in Texas and with the felony conviction. I sent this to you and Crystal as well.
Right.
So you can build your segments off a lot of these articles.
And one thing that I want people to know too, and guys, this is not the last time that we're going to address this, because if it's anything that I want to make sure that I am able to do, and that is to enfranchise people in the voting process. Being a history teacher, I'm cheating someone. I'm cheating lots of people if I'm not walking the walk.
Well, Crystal,
Yes.
real quick, I have a question because it's kind of relating to Vaughn's point. So, my mom left a comment. She said if a formerly incarcerated person mistakenly votes
or erroneously votes,
yes,
yes.
like what would happen with that? So, do you have like I don't know any information about?
Oh, you will.
And let
Yeah.
Professor Brandon speak to that too.
You will be prosecuted for voter fraud
Okay.
if everything is not up to point. In this article right here, and I'm gonna let Professor Brandon speak as well. But a lot of times we're not gonna come out and we're not gonna say, because it speaks to it right here.
Yeah.
To go get legal representation to allow you to understand the steps that you need to take before you can actually go out and vote.
Right.
And
We're not going to do that.
all of this has to do with, but no, because we don't want to place those barriers on people. Let me, Professor Brandon, let me let you chime in right here for just a second. And then I want to say this. A lot of this has to do with timing. If we're talking about getting people on board and on point right now and legally registered in a way that is appropriate, and they've dotted their I's and crossed their T's for the November election, there should be absolutely no issue with them with this many months.
It's not always true.
But
not always true.
What I'm saying is that if we start right now, there is time to circumvent everything that we'll go through. Go ahead, Professor Brandon, if you could speak to that.
No, I didn't have much more to add except what Vaughn said. In Texas, I don't know anybody personally who's been through that, but they did bring to mind two cases in New York, one a female and a male who did get charged with voter fraud. In fact, one of them I think was in the Marshall Project article that I was referencing earlier. So that is a possibility that you would get prosecuted for that. So that's I was just agreeing with Vaughn, and I don't know of anyone in Texas that has happened to, but I have heard of it in other states.
So what if they think, okay, well, my sentence is like completed, like based off like just based off like the language that they know, like like it's like the language is confusing, and a lot of times I feel like it's set up like that so people will not understand.
It's called legal jargon.
Yeah. So like, what if people are like, what if someone's like, okay, I completed my sentence, I think I'm good. Let's say if they don't have the economic means to go out and receive legal representation for that, like what do they do? Like
that one that you spoke about.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Yes, there is with the website that I found, and I will post that. As a matter of fact, I will post that tonight along with the resources that Vaughn brought here. But there is a number that you can call, and you enter in whatever the number is called that you had as your identification number.
Right.
And that they will be able to tell you based on that number that was your identification number whether or not you are discharged. And at that point, you may go ahead and register with your regular registration, voter registration card. And trust me on this, you will be well vetted this time around if you are not okay to go forward. Okay.
But I think that's just the first step. And I'm not going to take away from what anybody did. I haven't voted yet. I still have to February 28th,
2023.
Yes, before I'm discharged.
Okay.
But I've known people that have stories about situations. Actually, it was a sister that was on the news about 3 weeks before we started the campaign.
Yes.
And she did the mail-in ballots. And every time she resubmitted her mail-in ballot, they kicked it back out for some reason.
Right.
And it took her 10 times. Never been to prison.
Right.
Upstanding person in the community.
Right.
I think she was an educator.
Right.
So I'm saying that it's a start. It's a start to get us on the right path.
Okay, now that
as formerly convicted felons.
Yeah. Now that you're saying too, you're talking about probably like the lady that was on the Lawrence O'Donnell show, and it went national. She was in.
I believe so. I believe it was.
Yeah, but the thing about it is that was kind of a different situation. Okay. Yeah. However, when it comes to someone who has been within the prison system, whatever the number is. Now, this is specifically geared, this particular website is specifically geared to those who have been incarcerated.
Mhm.
And that's why they say you need to give whatever the identifying number that was used to identify you when you were within the TDC system. That number, I guess, is in a computer system database. You know,
It's gonna
for
follow you
here.
wherever you go.
That's what I mean.
Forever.
So when they reference that number, they will let you know if you are fully discharged, and you can download that so that you'll have something to compare that with. But my point is this: when you go to actually register from that point,
Mhm.
the state of Texas is going to they are going to purge voter registration once a month, every month now. Voter registration, that was one of the tips that I gave during the campaign. If you don't vote within 2 years, you may automatically be purged.
Yeah.
But they are going to be purging people who are no longer who are no longer active. So it's going to be a whole lot more carefully looked at if that is the case.
I think you have a great topic to however long you want to run your podcast, to where it's a lot of different variables.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different variables, because even, and I'm gonna leave it alone, you know, I hate to use the term devil's advocate,
No, but you got it.
but we have to be balanced in this issue.
Exactly.
And look at with the campaigning you just recently done, and all the other candidates, and 2 to 3 days after they tallied the votes,
Yeah.
10,000 mail-in ballots were misappropriated.
Right.
Okay, but Vaughn,
But it was
see what's going on. You talking about, you know,
that's
it's
different.
It's
Yeah.
an issue with issues with the voting period.
Right.
That's one thing.
Right.
But this right here is just dealing with getting
Registered.
getting registered.
I understand.
No,
I understand.
no,
And
my
one
people
thing-
that
Trust
been
me, I
part of the
understand.
Yeah, let's kind of go back in and get focused on the issue at hand. You're absolutely right. You have to dot all your I's and cross all your T's. What we don't want to do here is discourage anybody from going forward, because they may run into a snafu. Any problem out there can be circumvented if you have time to
and
do
the
that.
information.
Yes, and the correct
We need the
information.
resources.
I was able to reach out to the office of Texas Votes, okay, Longoria. And
Mhm. I
we
got
are
it on
going
here.
we're going to have a representative who is going to come on and who can speak from the voting entity within Harris County to these of Isabel Longoria to these particular questions, to make sure that we have completely covered in its entirety the types of issues that people could possibly run into,
Yeah.
or the types of things that they will need to do in the event that they do run into an issue, because we're not going to want to stand in a place of being a barrier. We want to take the barriers away. I don't ever want anyone to feel that that there is a barrier for them when there's actually not. Maybe you just needed to ask one more question. But Tony, did you want to add anything else? I see we got a lot of comments on there.
Well, I just wanted to say, based off my mom's last comment, I think I really agree with Vaughn. I feel like the information definitely needs to be presented first, because without the information, how is anyone gonna know what they can do? Like, I can be a upstanding citizen, let's say, who's been formerly incarcerated, but without the knowledge, how can I do anything? I mean, there's definitely like a devil's advocate seeking it out, and also giving it, like the people who are in charge, who are like your people in your government, like local, maybe city government, whatever, giving the information, but as well as seeking it out too, if that makes sense.
Well, I want to say this: Vaughn, Quincy, my sister Kim, and our former campaign team, several of us are already registered as volunteer deputy voter registrars, and we're going to be reaching out to that particular community and disseminating that information, making sure that we've gotten with the office of Isabel Longoria to have questions answered, because if no one else is doing it, we're going to be some of the ones that are going to spearhead this, because we would like people to know that yes, you are a part of the community. Yes, your voice does matter. And we want you on board, because when people have ownership, when they have ownership and what is going on around them, they feel more personally responsible for it.
Mhm.
And that brings a lot more equity to the table all the way around.
Definitely.
Well, my thing is, I'm the type of person I like full details before I get into anything. And so you mentioned about barriers and roadblocks.
Yes,
Okay, just because those things pop up doesn't mean it's not a solution to get around them.
absolutely.
That's why I speak on certain things, because
Right.
that's a part of the education
That's right.
process.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it is. Professor Brandon, can you? I knew that there was one more thing I wanted to ask you before I let you go. Can you think of are there organizations that are here in Harris County, of former people who were formerly incarcerated, that we probably would need to reach out to start disseminating that information? And if so, is that something, is that some information that we may be able to share with people?
Well, the Statewide Leadership Council is a new organization that is under the umbrella of what was formerly the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. I think they're the Texas Coalition for Justice and Equity is the new name. So that's who I would recommend. They have people in different areas like Harris County who can talk about the different things that they're doing. But the Statewide Leadership Council is one of the newer organizations that is specifically focusing on some political advocacy issues for the formerly incarcerated.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, gentlemen, and my young lady who is here helping us out, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to come on tonight, because we really just peel back one of the layers that we're going to have to delve into to actually get the ball moving on this. But you've got to start somewhere. And we intend to start there and carry this through and see how many people we can actually get vetted and registered to vote for the November general election. I think and if we can do that, I think that that's going to be a standard bearer for communities all over the state of Texas. And it's going to be a wonderful tool for making people feel as that they are being reincorporated into community.
A community that votes has hope.
I like that. A community that votes has hope. Thank you, Quincy. But guys, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I never know what camera to look into. I'm going to look at that one. But thank you so much for agreeing to come on. Thank you so much, Professor Brandon, for coming on, sharing your insight. This is someone who is working with individuals every day who will be released soon, many of them. This is information that they know too. If it doesn't pertain to them or won't pertain to them for 3 to 4 or 5 years, that's fine. There's a great chance that they know someone who's already out that it may pertain to. There's a great chance that someone who is out right now never knew that they actually are eligible to vote right now. All they've got to do are ask certain questions to make sure their eligibility is well vetted. But thank you so much again. Join me next week. I've got some great guests that'll be on, some other people who were formerly incarcerated and who are members of organizations that help and deal with some of the problems of people who have been formerly incarcerated. They're going to be on, and we're going to get the ball rolling, and we're possibly going to have someone on next week from the office of harrisvotes.org, and to actually answer some of those questions and possibly even get somebody registered on the show. So that'll be great. But thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to Crystal Loves Texas. I always will love Texas. I'm not running for any office right now. That makes it better. I can say what I want to say. But thank you, Professor Brandon. Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you,
You're
Quincy.
welcome.
Thank you, Tony. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.